There was a man named Rodrigo Meneses who lived on the outskirts of Guadalajara. To the uninstructed eye, Rodrigo's life was a testament to limitation and lack. He was a simple farmhand, cultivating land that belonged to others since he was barely 14 years old. He had calloused hands, a wary back, and a life strictly governed by the harsh dictates of the physical world. Every dawn, Rodrigo rose long before the sun. He owned no land, no livestock, and no tools that he could call his own. Yet, physical appearances are entirely deceptive to those who understand spiritual law. While Rodrigo appeared impoverished in the material realm, he possessed a mind that was remarkably rich. He carried a simple, unshakable faith, inherited from his grandmother, and a small notebook where he recorded his deepest thoughts before sleep. He was an ordinary man, practically invisible to the bustling world of commerce and society. But he was extraordinary within. What the world did not know about Rodrigo was that every single night, when his grueling labor was done, he knelt beside his bed and spoke with divine intelligence in a highly specific, scientific way. He did not beg in desperation. He did not plead in fear or anxiety. He spoke with a calm, deliberate gratitude, acting entirely as though his heart already possessed that which his hands had not yet touched. This silent, unseen practice was building a tremendous spiritual momentum that was about to change his life forever. The study of scientific prayer teaches us clearly that true prayer is never a desperate plea flung into a cold, empty void. It is not an attempt to change the mind of a reluctant creator. It is, rather, an intimate realization of the divine presence that already dwells within you, and an alignment of your consciousness with the good that already exists. Rodrigo did not know the formal, metaphysical terminology for what he was doing, but he practiced this truth instinctively, and the universe, which operates on exact and infallible laws, was silently responding to his inner vibrations. His demonstration did not begin the day he acquired his land. The manifestation of any great good rarely happens by sudden accident. It began decades earlier, on a rainy afternoon, when his grandmother Consuelo imparted a lesson that would alter the entire trajectory of his spiritual destiny. Rodrigo was only 10 years old when Consuelo sat him under a rusting tin roof and delivered a truth that strikes at the heart of all spiritual misunderstanding. She said, "Rodrigo, never pray to God like a beggar. Speak to him as a son." Those precise words took profound root in his soul. Consuelo was a woman of deep, practical faith who had weathered enormous personal and financial losses with a serenity that completely baffled her neighbors. She had lost crops, she had buried a child, yet she radiated a peace that could not be shaken by external conditions. When asked her secret, she would simply say, "I have learned to look with the inner eye, not the eyes of the world." Rodrigo grew up keenly observing this distinction. While others in his village prayed cowering in fear of divine punishment, pleading with a god they believed to be a capricious monarch, she prayed with the quiet, unyielding confidence of one speaking to an unconditionally loving father. Spiritual seeds planted in the receptive, uncluttered mind of a child are the most powerful forces in the universe. A spiritual truth received by an open heart establishes deep roots that no storm in adult life can entirely uproot. Years later, a unique opportunity presented itself in the physical realm. The state government announced a special lottery to redistribute a limited number of ranch lands to landless farming families. Rodrigo read the requirements on a faded poster at the local supply store, realized he perfectly met the qualifications, and quietly registered his name. Crucially, he told absolutely no one what he had done, not even his beloved wife Lucia. In the science of mind, there is a vital rule regarding the gestation of a new demonstration, the rule of silence. By keeping his intention secret, he protected his fragile new seed of hope from the doubts, fears, and negative suggestions of the mortal minds around him. He did not wish to awaken in Lucia any anxious hope that might turn into the paralyzing fear of disappointment. During the agonizing weeks of waiting, Rodrigo engaged in a profound internal process. At night, instead of anxiously desiring the ranch, instead of begging the heavens to favor him, or calculating his dismal mathematical odds, he practiced the highest form of spiritual treatment, affirmative prayer. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply to quiet his physical senses, and visualized absolute gratitude. He gave thanks for the land as if it were already his. He felt the soil in his hands. He felt the warmth of the sun on his own property. He established the mental equivalent of the ranch in his consciousness before the physical manifestation could possibly occur. Lucia began to notice a remarkable, almost unnatural serenity in her husband during those weeks. He was not agitated. He was not obsessively checking for news. When she finally asked him how he felt about their future and the rumors of the land draw, he simply smiled with profound peace. "I have left it in God's hands," he said, "and God's hands are entirely good." This was not the passive resignation of a defeated man. It was an active, dynamic declaration of spiritual trust. When you pray from a state of anticipatory gratitude, from the inner certainty that the divine good is already flowing toward you, you activate a highly receptive state of consciousness. You throw open the mental doors and windows that fear and doubt previously kept bolted shut. The day of the lottery finally arrived, marked by a blazing sun over the municipal plaza. There were over 200 anxious families registered for only 15 available ranches. To the ordinary, logical mind calculating the odds, the mathematical probability was incredibly discouraging. The atmosphere in the plaza was thick with desperate hope and palpable fear. Rodrigo arrived early, found a seat on a wooden bench, and simply closed his eyes and smiled. A neighbor named Donato, vibrating with nervous energy, leaned over and asked in a low voice if Rodrigo had some inside connection with the government, or if he knew something the others did not. Rodrigo opened his eyes and gently shook his head. "I have no contacts," he said softly. "I only have faith." Donato let out a cynical, nervous laugh and turned his attention back to the stage, trusting only in the random chaos of luck. But Rodrigo simply closed his eyes again, resting in the absolute certainty of his inner work. When the government official reached into the glass drum and pulled out the very first slip of paper, he leaned into the microphone and read a name that no one in the calculating crowd expected: Rodrigo Meneses. There was a stunned, heavy silence in the plaza, followed by a wave of confused murmurs. Rodrigo opened his eyes slowly, moving with the deliberate calm of a man waking from a dream he had already lived countless times in his mind. He stood up. He did not shout. He did not run or wave his hands in disbelief. With damp eyes and an unnatural, grounded calm, he simply whispered to the sky, "Thank you." His fellow farmers were utterly baffled by his reaction. They expected tears of euphoria, the wild, chaotic celebration of a man who had just been handed a 1-in-a-million miracle. But Rodrigo simply walked to the stage, received the legal documents with both hands, and murmured his thanks to the officials. It was as if, in some deep, unshakable place within his soul, he already knew the land was his. That night, returning to his small, rented home, Rodrigo laid the papers on the table and explained everything to his weeping, overjoyed wife. Weeks after Rodrigo legally received his land and began to plan his future, a quiet event occurred that brought his instinctive spiritual practice into the light of conscious understanding. A retired rural schoolteacher in his village, a man who had spent years studying New Thought philosophy, gifted Rodrigo a book. It was a Spanish translation of the teachings of Emmet Fox on prayer and prosperity. Rodrigo read this book at night by the beam of a flashlight. With every page he turned, he felt a profound shock of recognition. It was as if a master teacher was putting precise technical names to the very practices Rodrigo had utilized in the dark all his life. Emmet Fox wrote that every external condition in a person's life begins first as an internal reality. Before anything can manifest in the visible, physical world, it must first exist as a living consciousness in the invisible world of thought and faith. Rodrigo realized he had not simply won a ranch on the day of the lottery. He had been diligently constructing its mental equivalent for years through quiet prayer and undisturbed trust. The book contained one specific teaching that stopped Rodrigo dead in his tracks on his third night of reading. Fox described the critical difference between praying with fear and praying with faith, using an image Rodrigo would never forget. The man who prays from a state of fear is busily constructing a brick wall between himself and his good. The man who prays from a state of faith is opening a door that was always there. This distinction soon became a lifeline for a woman in Rodrigo's village named Esperanza Villanueva. Esperanza was a single mother of 3 who worked exhausting hours as a cook in the municipal market. Like so many good, well-intentioned people, Esperanza lived with a mixture of sincere religious devotion and constant, grinding despair. When she heard about Rodrigo's demonstration, something stirred within her. She sought him out and asked the question that plagues millions of minds. "What did you do differently, Rodrigo?" "I pray every single day. I believe in God. But my life never changes. The struggle never ends." Rodrigo listened with deep compassion. And then he asked her a question that completely bypassed her theology and went straight to her consciousness. Esperanza, when you pray, how do you feel while you are doing it? Are you filled with the terror that it won't work, or are you filled with the peace that it is already resolved? Esperanza was left speechless. It touched a raw nerve of truth. She prayed with tremendous intensity, often with tears, repeating words endlessly, but always with a heavy, sickening anxiety in the pit of her stomach. She was praying with the desperate hope of convincing a reluctant God to help her, rather than from the absolute certainty that divine intelligence already desired her ultimate good. That subtle difference in the ear, but massive difference in practice, changes absolutely everything. Emmet Fox explained that the internal quality of the prayer strictly determines its external result. It is not the volume of your words, the dramatic emotion with which they are spoken, or the hours spent on your knees that activates divine power. It is the state of consciousness from which you operate. Praying from fear only multiplies fear. Praying from faith activates the divine response that was already waiting to be received. But to truly manifest, the channel must be clear of toxic debris. As Rodrigo shared these teachings, another neighbor, Celestino Herrera, attended the gatherings. Celestino had been locked in a bitter years-long legal battle over a piece of inherited land. The process had consumed him with toxic resentment. It ruined his health, strained his marriage, and destroyed his joy. When Rodrigo read Fox's words stating that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, Celestino felt it like a physical blow. Fox taught that no prayer can work efficiently while the heart harbors active resentment. It acts as a spiritual kink in the hose, blocking the flow of divine good. Fox used the metaphor of a dirty window. The sunlight outside is perfect and blazing, but it cannot illuminate the room if the glass is covered in thick mud.